Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for making the time. This is the second of a three-series webinars on competitive intelligence. This one about organization to intelligence, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the whole thing. So the first part was strategy to organization, structure, and big rules. Please check it out. It's available online, as I'll point in a second. This one is about organization to intelligence. It's really fundamentally about what we do with the data that we gather. How do we analyze it? How do we synthesize it? And how do we formulate it such that it can be ready for part 3, which we'll do later this month. And that's intelligence to action and all the activity that we need to do to enable sales. So that's the webinar series. Now, why are we doing this webinar series? We're doing it because organizations today need to do kind of 3 things. They need to transform, they need to market, and they need to grow. On the transformation part, there are so many market trends and technology trends that you have to put your arms around. There needs to be good strategy and planning that is actually practical and can cause good change management. You need to know what your customers think, et cetera, et cetera. On the market front, you need to do market execution. You need to know what the market sizes are, and competitive analysis smack in the middle of all of that. It really connects the transformation to the growth. And every time we do things like value proposition and messaging, or strategy and planning, or demand generation, or whatever we do for market presence, competitive analysis is always a pretty fundamental part of it. So it makes sense to focus on it and try to put some processes behind it. If you go to orionx.net/webinar, you will see all the different webinars that we have done. Part 1 was at the bottom left of the slide here, and that's available there. We've done one on marketing in the age of coronavirus, building a community, how to do a podcast series, how to do market surveys and get at customer sentiment. And then this one, of course, is the second of the competitive intelligence, and the next one is coming up on September 29th at noon. So mark your calendars and spread the word. Thank you. Okay, so the fundamental focus of this is on analysis and synthesis. So I want to take you through a little bit of our thinking and where all these processes came from and how we go about analyzing and managing them. So the strategy process that we advocate and we follow is to really ask for 2 questions. Will it achieve the business objectives, and can it be implemented? In order to do that, we start with data at the bottom. Note that the data is at the bottom because the data is supporting everything above it rather than drive it. While data-driven is a good thing, we think data-supported, judgment-driven may in fact be more appealing in practice. So on top of the data, you analyze it, and that's kind of taking it all apart and just kind of throwing all this piece of data on a table. And then you have to synthesize it when you selectively reaggregate it into the nuggets of wisdom and effective communication that can really turn the knob. And then you have to deal with the change management part of it. And hopefully you've done enough of that up front so that when you roll it out, it can really work quite effectively. We also have this 4-step program, 4-step model that looks at, on the top right-hand side, you look at a compelling vision. No matter what you're doing in terms of competitive intelligence or where you want to go, you need a compelling vision. And a vision needs to be inevitable. It needs to be inspiring. It needs to feel real. And the real part leads to item number 2. So you need to have some existing credibility that qualifies you to pursue whatever you're trying to do. Item 3 is a revenue roadmap. While you're going from your existing credibility towards that compelling vision, you want to have milestones that can actually generate revenue. And all of that gets translated into a go-to-market program, a rollout program, and that's item number 4. As you go through all of this, a few things pop out. One is your culture. Your culture is going to drive how aggressively or how with what style you're going to pursue this kind of execution. There needs to be a concept of readiness. Are you ready to do this? Is the customer ready to adopt it? Is the product ready to do what it's supposed to do? Are the market trends ready to accommodate this and create an environment where budgets can be allocated? What do customers think, and what do you do in terms of execution? basically the analysis work is to look at all the different things that create a successful company and break it up into pieces that you can then go and pursue. So you need, go to market, sales enablement, brand, customer, all of those are what we're going to break apart and have a model on how to pursue. Number one is market trends. You want to make sure that what you do is aligned with market trends or skating to the puck, so to say. You want to understand customer values, their time horizon, their buying process, etc. You want to look at your own brand attributes, your brag sheet, what your strengths and weaknesses you've got. That leads to SWOT analysis. You want to have a market map that looks at the mega trends and the brand permission and customer needs. And then you want to look at your product and technology and do some head-to-head comparisons when necessary. So what does that do? We start with needs analysis and a kind of a business situation. If you've looked at our website at all, we advocate that you track 3 categories of data: market data, customer data, and product data. On the market front, is it steady or is it being disrupted? Right now, pretty much every market is being disrupted, either by digitization or by AI or by blockchain or whatnot. In terms of a SWOT analysis, market map, and value chain, these are different models that allow you to get a good grip on who you're competing with, for what customer you're competing with them in, where they reside on the value chain, what the market map looks like. If you go to part 1 of this webinar series, we looked at that value chain model in a little bit of a detail there. In terms of a company, are you an established company or are you a challenger? In terms of customers, what are their values? What are their buying behavior, sales cycle, their relevance? And from a product, are you leading, are you matching, or are you lagging? And that really makes a difference in terms of where you want to go. On customer values, the 4 categories that we recommend that we pursue are buying behavior. And we have kind of filled up these models as we go forward, just kind of as a sample. Yours is going to be different. So when you look at these charts, you're going to populate them according to what's real for you. For example, in this particular make-believe that that exercise that we went through to fill this up, for the buying behavior, for example, it's a complex buying behavior. There's committees and multiple approvals. There's politics involved. There's personal agenda involved. Some of that is true regardless, but some of that show up more in a large-scale buying process. What are the deployments? These are large-scale deployments. They could be multiple simultaneous procurements. There could be long sales cycles. You want to understand what the buying behavior means. You basically need feature, benefits, pain points, and then buying behavior. So buying behavior is what's going to allow the customer to address their pain point based on your benefits that are driven from your features. You want to look at appetite for risk. Are your customers risk averse or not? Do they worry about product quality or features? How long are they going to keep this? If it's a long sales cycle development, that they kind of have a different appetite for risk. Vendor viability versus price. This is why a lot of startups have difficulty breaking into accounts, because even though they have everything, they may or may not look as viable as a multi-billion-dollar competitor that they might have. Is it completeness of solution versus the strength of a point product? Do they do evaluation and test before they roll out, or do they not have that capability? What sort of vendor relationship style they have? Do they want to have an intellectual relationship with their vendors or a transactional relationship? Are they long-term focused or short-term focused? Are they active interactions after they buy, or do they just buy and kind of disappear? And what are their expectations? Do they need hand-holding? Do they need responsiveness? What sort of service and support they need? All of that feeds into what strengths of your products and your offering you're going to highlight when you get to that point. And what does a typical deployment look like for them? What's the scale of that deployment? There are companies that may just buy 20 of something and implement it in like 4 different locations, and those that are just kind of getting their feet wet. Are they proactive in terms of pursuit of these new technologies and solutions, or are they lagging and reactive? Do they have a global presence or a local presence? Then you go to brand attributes. For brand attributes, the 4 things that come up are customers, investors, employees, and influencers. So in terms of customers, you want to look at how they look at the portfolio of products that you have, the quality of the product, the responsiveness of the company, the value that they derive from the company, what sort of market presence they ascribe to the company. Investors may be looking for innovation, the quality of execution, the profitability, what sort of growth curve you want they perceive you to be on. And employees, they want accountability, clarity of vision, organizational alignment, good management, empowerment, and of course, influencers, market leadership, vision, competence, consistency. Influencers could be industry analysts or financial analysts or important journalists or authors that have an opinion that is listened to by the customer base. And then when you look at the SWOT for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that's a pretty standard thing that you probably have done as part of your other activities. Oftentimes when we look at these, they need maybe a little bit of a refresh. Very occasionally, they might just need to be redone. The SWOT analysis can be at the company level, can be at the industry level, can be at the product level. You probably want it at the right level, and you may have to do all of the above to get to that. So the strengths could be financial, it could be operational, it could be R&D, it could be that strategy that is aligned with market trends. It could be strong momentum that you have in a market segment. In this particular case, it would be like B2B. It could be the installed base of enterprise and small, medium business that a company may have that they can leverage into adjacent markets. The weaknesses could be an incomplete transformation towards wherever you want to go. The reliance on partners for parts of the solution that you may not have available. A perception as a company that doesn't quite fit with where the market trends are going. The opportunities could be the emerging trends. It could be the gap that's created by some market activity or some competitive move. Maybe somebody acquired somebody else and created a market gap. So you want to look at those opportunities. It could be new alliances that you could pursue. And the threats could be things like, for example, in the server business, public cloud could be a threat for established vendors. New mobile cloud players, suddenly people like Google, Apple, and Samsung who did not compete with you are suddenly competing with you. That could be a threat. Or established players are moving into new turfs and you might kind of feel left behind. The market map looks at customer needs, trends, brand permission, and barriers. The customer needs could be financial, operational, R&D. Those are the things that they want to see in their vendor before they work. Strategy that's aligned with trends, again, strong momentum in a particular segment that they're in, installed base in the segment that they're in. If, for example, you're especially strong in manufacturing segment, you might appeal to other manufacturing players. You want to look at market trends, transformation towards next market imperative, reliance on partners for ecosystem, perceived strengths in growth and stagnant markets. In terms of brand permission, it goes back to that 4-step program that we had. What sort of existing credibility do you have? Positioning for new markets, adjacent markets, new geographies, new alliance strategies, and barriers. Well, who are the entrenched competitors? What is the investment? What is the horizon for that investment? Are you able to invest something and reap the rewards 5 years later, or do you really need it to pay off in 2 years? And what are the big players doing? So all of that, once you've done all of that, you want to then hash that into a bunch of deliverables. The deliverables require a deliverable strategy. You want that deliverable strategy because it is highly internally focused on a SIPOC model. That's the input, process, output, supplier, input, process, output, and consumer. So you want to understand who within the organization is the recipient of these deliverables and make sure that you have a process that delivers it to them in a predictable way. You want to have some metrics around that. These deliverables require some sort of a technology strategy. If you're a small company, you just make do. If you're a bigger company, you do want to pay attention to where it's residing, where's kind of your central website for competitive intelligence, what sort of database you use in the back end, in what way is it hooked up to your win-loss analysis and your customer reference program, what sort of app you might want for the Salesforce to use. And then you have a sharing strategy, whether it's for internal or for your channel, which is pretty much internal, but a little bit, you know, maybe a tad outside of that. And then what you do for public consumption. And then you want to curate your content and deliverables. You need a taxonomy for even the file names, who audience it is for, what sort of sales stage it is targeted at, what is the expiration date for the material. Many a time the sales guys go on some website and get, you know, pick a material that has been just too old. It's been sitting there and it just doesn't apply anymore. So you want to have that. And then for the actual content that you would deliver, and part 3 of this webinar series is going to drill down into how you actually produce all this material. You want to look at who the requesters are. It could be the executives, it could be sales, it could be PR, analyst relations or social media, marketing, customer service or advocacy, product development. Who are we doing it for? Who's requesting this? What is the purpose of it? Is it to gain insight? Is it to accelerate the funnel? Is it to establish credibility, to show endorsement, to be used for demand gen? Is it going to be used for customer satisfaction or loyalty programs? Is it providing product feedback and product direction? And then what are the types of the content? You know, are you getting it out of the, you know, executive, you know, customer advisory board or executive advisory council? Or is it a quote from some customer? Is it social media? Is it a case study? Is it an analyst call? On and on and on. All right, so some closing thoughts, and we're more or less on time, is that analysis and synthesis are different skill sets. We've done this many times, and it really is different. Occasionally you find somebody or a few people who are really good at both. And if you find them, latch onto them, grab them. That's a really unique skill set. But generally you want to have enough people in the room who are really good at analysis and they can do their part, and those who can really string things together and synthesize things well, and they do their part. Synthesis really is the purpose of analysis, but without good analysis, it will miss the mark. We've seen a lot of positioning, messaging, content that is just because the analysis wasn't good, they just missed a bunch of important things. So even though what they came up with sounds good, it really doesn't resonate with the customers or with the sales force. Do review part 1 and the big rules that we have. And finally, shrink it to fit and expand it to enrich. Competitive intelligence can be a giant task. And if you're a multi-billion-dollar company, you may very well want to treat it as a giant task. But if you're a startup or a small company, there's a lot you can do just within your own organization with just a little bit of focus and some of the processes that you could just use from folks like us. You can put a big dent into it without really spending any money. And then with that, we open to questions if there is any. And I will go to a little bit of how we can go from here. This, what you see on this slide is our team at OrionX. Contact us. You can send us an email at info@OrionX or firstname.lastname@OrionX. You can reach every one of us. Some of the things that we're working on is to simplify the big mega trends that drive digital transformation, things like 5G, IoT, AI, HPC, blockchain, crypto, quantum. We've come up with this human marketing process that we think is really well fit for the times, and we've done some work with budgeting, planning, and execution. We think community is a really big thing in this new world, and it is important for every company to have a community strategy and build the community and look at the community as the bigger version of like a funnel, so to say, and the whole kind of the entire everybody under the umbrella, under the tent. We can do customer-focused content creation, video, podcasts, etc. We've done obviously competitive intelligence, and we've also done educational webinars and podcasts that our research analysts host, and that way your executives can just be guests and they can just show up. And I mentioned human marketing, so I'm just going to cover it a little bit. We think there's a whole new digital. That is new audience, new content, new competition. It's the same audience, but their behavior is different. They're now a lot more digital because all of this COVID stuff has accelerated that. And that really leads into a new mission. The quality of engagement is important because it's digital. You can do things that you couldn't do before. You can have ongoing relationships that you need to cultivate that you couldn't do before. You could do before and it's more difficult to do. You want to cultivate community that necessarily needs to be online. And what you need for that is authenticity, because you want to be real. empathy, because customers want to work with someone who cares in a genuine way, and advocacy, which means you have your customer hat on and you think about what's really good for them. Okay, so with that, I will go to Q&A, and there seems to be a couple of them, so we will see. Okay. One question is that you really didn't cover synthesis other than the summary. Can you say more? Yes, in fact, we have a big process on how to generate compelling value proposition and messaging, and a messaging platform that can be used for all the content creation. And you're right, in the interest of time, that was kind of skipped a little bit, but a lot of it actually has to do with the head-to-head analysis and the result of the competitive intelligence. So once you've done that analysis, you can then use that to create some of those. And contact me offline and I can send you some material. One other question is, can you provide an example of how IronX is helping a client implement an effective competitive analysis strategy? I can give you some examples. We've done work for larger companies where the task was, how do you structure and organize the competitive intelligence function? And that is a lot, again, related to the culture of the company and where they are in their journey. So essentially what we do is to create a corporate roadmap for competitive intelligence in a cascaded fashion, where you can show results and justify the next step, and over time build an organization that delivers and becomes part of the corporate operating system. We've also done projects where it's been a little bit more tactical, and it's been, how do I arm and aim the sales force, where we have applied this process to create presentation material, beat sheets or competitive, crib sheets that Salesforce can use, and give them a narrative that they can use with customers in a credible, cohesive, ethical sort of a way. So maybe with that, and we are just under 30 minutes, let me look at if there's any other question. And what are some of the risks of not implementing good competitive approach? There can be. We see a lot of customers who are in fact running a little bit blind. They think they cannot do it, and in fact they can. I think this is more a question of culture than a question of resources. As I said, there's a lot you can do yourself, just within the small team that you may have if you're a startup, or within the overtaxed team that you can have within your large company, because everybody within the large company, it is perceived to have a lot of resources, but nobody has it, as you know. So there's a lot you can do. And frankly, there's also a lot of free stuff you can take advantage of by just kind of calling folks like us who would be happy to get on the phone for half an hour, whether or not there's really a deal involved, and try to help you and build a relationship. So there's a lot of material online that I recommend that you look at, and the processes that you can look at. So maybe we conclude here, and I look forward to seeing many of you, and maybe more for part 3. Thank you very much.